We're the Fly Over Yogis, a group of Midwest friends sharing practical, everyday approaches to yoga, wellness, lifestyle,
and everything in between as we live through them ourselves, yoga on and off the mat.
We are Lindsay, Gina,
Jordan,
and Megan. We work to create authenticity in everything we do.
And we're sharing our experiences with others to inspire mindful living, no matter your home state. Today on the Fly Over Yogis, we are going to talk about some misconceptions about the yogic lifestyle and the yogi world. So what are some things that you guys think are misconceptions that people, especially in the Midwest where we live, have about being a yogi?
So I know for me personally, a lot of people see yoga as this, so very what's the word I'm looking for? Other side of the spectrum, as opposed to people thinking it's like kumbaya hippie stuff, but also people thinking that it's like literally just stretching. So yes. People are like, oh, I'd go to yoga, but I want to get a good workout. And so that's been, even though it seems really small, a very common misconception that I've had to get over. People are like, oh, I want to, do more than just spend an hour stretching. So, of course, as teachers, we're telling people that, yes, it is more than that. You can exercise, you can work your abs like no one's business. So even I've only got my sister to come do yoga with me, twice now? She's finally started coming, even though I've been doing yoga for like 3 years. She's finally started coming like, oh, actually, Jordan's like a total badass and doing all of this hard shit because she does yoga. All right, I just started cursing, so that's okay.
No, and to kind of backpack off that, I hear all the time when, I introduce myself and you get into that conversation when you meet somebody, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm a yoga instructor. And there's always a couple different responses of, oh, you must be really flexible. Oh, you must be able to do these really crazy contortion poses. And I think that kind of relates to everyone thinking that yoga is just stretching. And when I tell people, yeah, I'm really strong, I always get a bunch of weird looks. They're like, do you lift? What else do you do? And I'm like, no, I just do yoga.
I lift
and,
my body.
I'm really strong because, yeah, you lift your body weight in yoga. And there's that misconception that you have to be flexible to practice yoga. And I'm like, girl, that's why you go to yoga, to get flexible.
Mm-hmm, right.
But there's this huge misconception just along with that yoga is just stretching. And people, for some reason, think, well, if I'm not flexible, I can't stretch, which is... what?
Like you have to be that way in order to go to a yoga class. You already have to be of a certain flexibility, and that's not true. Yeah.
No, I mean, each practice, and I know all of us as instructors and teachers, we all believe this, that each practice is a mix of strength and flexibility. So you're not only getting the flexibility part that everyone kind of associates with yoga, but you're also getting that strength training that people, once they're in a yoga class, are like, wow, I can actually feel my biceps burning. I can feel that my abs are on fire. Hello, I have quads I didn't know existed. And so there's that big misconception that you have to be a certain body type to practice yoga because it's not a workout, it's just stretching. So I think that's another big misconception here, just because a lot of people kind of also associate yoga with like the 80s Jane Fonda videos where they just kind of expect that to be the class atmosphere, and it's not.
Mm-hmm. And I get a lot of questions from my high school students, too, when I post a picture on my Twitter or my Instagram, which are public, and I keep them school appropriate because I know my students follow them. But when maybe I'm at kickboxing, because they see that as something that is the total opposite of what it means to be, like, they think hippie when they think yoga. They think peaceful. They think like love and peace and whatever.
Which is still true.
It is still true.
Yeah,
it
which
can
is
be
an
true.
aspect of it,
Yeah, but I mean, I get frustrated and I get stressed, and yoga is one outlet for that. But also, kickboxing and boxing is something that I use in another way for another form of exercise, and so they're always really surprised to see that there's that duality to my workouts, I guess, and that I do lift and that I do have lots of different methods of exercise. So they think that it's weird. So that's just coming from high school students. So take it with a grain of salt, of course. But they are people, too, who will grow up to be adults who spread their ideas to each other. And yeah.
I've also had a couple people tell me that they're like, oh, but yoga's so boring. I was like, hang on, like, what do you mean yoga's boring? They're like, you sit, like, and you move slowly, and you listen to quiet music, and it's all about relaxing. Kind of going back to the, like, oh, I want to get a good workout, and I'm just stretching. But, like, and so it's like, the classes I teach, like, we might start off a little slower because we're warming up the muscle, getting the body ready to go. But by, like, the middle, by the time we're, like, really in the flow, we're jamming. Like, I've got pop music playing, we're moving quickly, our heart rates are up. Like, after a few sun salutations, your heart rate goes up. And so to try to, like, explain that to, like, oh, no, it's too slow, it's too boring. Like, oh, I'd go to yoga and fall asleep. It's like, but I don't think you're doing yoga right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's also different types of yoga, which is something I didn't even know until we started yoga teacher training, where I had never heard the word vinyasa or restorative or, you know, Ashtanga or Iyengar. I didn't know. I thought yoga was just yoga. Whatever studio I went into, I was going to get a good workout. I was going to stretch. I was going to work on flexibility. I was going to work on strength. I did not know that there were different types of yoga. And I think that that was a misconception I had myself. And it's something that people have a misconception of yoga, is they think it's all just restorative, where you have blankets and sandbags and props and you're just laying down and you're going to go to sleep. And there are those yoga classes. I'm not going to dismiss that. And they're wonderful. But there are also, you know, our vinyasa styled yoga where you are moving quick, where you are connecting the breath with the body. And there are times where you're like, man, I can't breathe because my body is constricted in this pose. And it is a workout. And so there are different types of yoga. And I feel people kind of just shove yoga into this hole of just, this is yoga, but they don't really know, okay, yes, this is yoga and here's the broader cloud, but there's a raindrop different type of yogas that fall from that cloud that we actually practice. And I think that's a huge misconception, is when people come in and I say, you know, I practice and I teach about 4 different styles of yoga, and I kind of get that side head tilt of, wait, there's different types of yoga, and people are always kind of confused about that. And I just think it's not talked about enough for people to know, you know, there are different types, there are different poses you're going to do in different classes, there's different transitions, there's different levels of workout and strength, and people just don't know that until they get into a class.
And that is really hard to get people to try it. And I have noticed that with the different classes and the different venues that I teach, is that some people are more willing to give it a shot and some people are less willing. Or at the particular fitness center that I teach at, people want to go to the power yoga classes, but they don't want to go to the yoga for the inflexible class. And I think that, again, there's the misconception that, well, if I'm already flexible, so I don't need this, but there's something I can get out of every single type of yoga class. But I'm of the mindset as a yoga teacher and practitioner that I'm open-minded, and that I can get things from every single class based on modifications, based on different options of the different postures. And similarly, someone who goes to the yoga for the inflexible class can still attend a power yoga or a vinyasa class. So I think getting people in the classes is kind of the challenge too. But if you have the person in one class, then maybe then you can talk them into coming to the next one. But it's definitely a mindset. And I think that we are, especially in this region of the country and just as Americans in general, very stubborn population of people. But also, I'm being originally from Missouri, our motto for the state is the show me state. And I grew up realizing that means like the prove it state, like show me, prove it to me. And that was what we were taught. I know that it comes from something somewhere, but and I think that that's a mindset in this region as well as in our country in general, that we want to prove, or we want to have something tangible to hold on to before we try. Like it's not an open-minded overall kind of population of people. And so we want to try to change that and grow that population's open-mindedness. And, we're starting here in the Midwest.
So that's a really good point. Not even just specifically about yoga. So people are always complaining like there's so much more to do on the coast and everything, and how they always say it takes like 5 years for the cool stuff to make it to Wichita, which is where we're recording from. It's because we have that mindset. It's like we have to know it's going to work before we actually start doing it. And so like we have this big surgence of pride in our local downtown, and like all these local businesses and entrepreneurs are coming, and of course, there have been some yoga people that are a part of that as well, starting yoga businesses. And it's because we have to have this mindset like, oh, you prove it to me first, and then we'll jump on the bandwagon, but not before.
Definitely.
And I think there's something to be said. You know, I hear from a lot of people that practice a more traditional style of yoga is that you shouldn't charge for your classes, or there's different kind of mindsets for different types of yoga and different yoga instructors out there. And there's yoga instructors that do donation based. There's yoga instructors that own huge, massive studios. And from a business side of yoga, like a friend of mine asked me, how do you keep students coming back? What's different for yoga than going to Genesis or going to Planet Fitness or going to, you know, a Pilates studio or a cycling studio? Why should I come to yoga instead of going to spin in the morning? And I can't answer that as just a yoga instructor. And if I take myself out of the yoga instructor role, I can't answer that for you, because that has to be something you decide. I used to run, I used to kickbox, I used to lift. I mean, if there was a workout class out there, I probably have tried it. And yoga, I found yoga kind of incidentally, like we talked about, but when I came to yoga, I find that I have more strength and more flexibility, and I'm not so stressed out. And my muscles, they're sore, but they're not like that achy, I need to take an ice bath for 20 minutes type of sore. And I always tell people, you can, by all means, go take that kickboxing class, go take that spin class. But what I find about why people come back to teaching yoga or to practicing yoga, or why they practice yoga 3 to 4 times a week, is because how they feel. So you might get into a pose, and I had a lady who really struggled with this, and she said, I feel like when I squat, I'm not getting any lower, and everyone else is getting so much lower than I am. Am I doing this wrong? Can I not do yoga? Is yoga just not for me? And I think there's this huge conception that if you're not doing the same pose everyone else in the room is, then you're a bad yogi, which I'm sorry, that term should not exist. It really shouldn't, because yoga is just the journey of yourself, and it's the journey of your body. And there are days where I can do a pose and it feels amazing, and the next morning I wake up and I can't do it. And that doesn't make me any less of a yogi or any less of a teacher. It just means my body's different that day, and that's a really hard mindset to get used to, I think, because we are always used to kind of like with lifting or running, you know, you lift more, or your times get slower, they get faster, or, you know, you kickbox and you can feel that your biceps are burning and they're getting bigger, and that's a slower progress with yoga. But what I told this lady who had asked me, you know, can I not practice yoga because my squat isn't getting any lower? I asked her, I said, how do you feel when you squat now, though? And she took a moment and she thought about it, and she said, I'm not as sore, and my hips feel more open, and, you know, my thighs, my hamstrings are not as tight. And I said, then you're doing it right. Just because you don't look like everyone else in the room does not make you a yogi, does not make you not a yogi. And I said, you know, you can practice the same pose for an entire year and not see any difference in the pose, but it's about how you feel. And that's really hard here, because people want that proof of, oh, I'm getting deeper, and I'm getting deeper into this pose, and I'm going to the next level of this pose, or I'm getting into this next variation of the pose. And when they stop seeing that progression a little bit, they start to freak out of, oh, I can't practice yoga anymore. And that's not true at all. Yeah.
Are there any people in your classes, or even family members from when you started YTT? Have you had any experiences of pushback from being a yogi, from being a yoga instructor, from being involved in this lifestyle, from anybody in your life?
My parents were a little not they were never negative about anything, but they were a little surprised that I was interested in doing teacher training. They were a little bit just, oh, like, what are you going to do in teacher training? Like, what are you going to get out of that? And their mindset immediately went toward the more of a, like, oh, so you're going to do it to make money on this side along with, like, your regular job and everything else. Whereas, like, initially when I went into it, like, it was just for me sort of thing. And as I went into it a little bit more, and some of the books we were reading and some of the different things we went through, they're like, so are you learning poses, or are you learning, like, philosophy? Or, like, that book says philosophy on it. And they were very thrown off by, like, yoga philosophy, and very thrown off by the thought of having a different mindset about things like that. It threw them off a little bit, I think.
Probably, too, so I can't remember who mentioned it earlier, but that yoga is only poses. People are surprised when there's something else, because maybe some people literally don't know. And I think on the other hand, some people think that it's not just poses or just exercise at all, that it's affiliated specifically with religion, or that if you do yoga, or if you're a yogi or yoga teacher, that you are associated with a particular religion. So I think, it definitely goes both ways for sure.
So my grandfather is about 68, 69. If he's listening, don't argue with me about this. I'm calling you 68. But when I had talked to my parents, my family's very close. We're very close-knit. We meet every Sunday. My whole family gets together. We do Sunday dinners. You know, people in the Midwest, our families are really close together. We don't have those like, oh, I never talked to so-and-so. We're really close-knit type of people. We like to have those connections. We like to have those attachments. And so, of course, I share a lot of my life with my family. They're a huge part of my life. And when I spoke with my parents about doing yoga teacher training, and then throughout yoga teacher training, my grandfather was very silent throughout the whole discussion. And then about halfway through, he kind of sat up one night off the couch a little bit and said, okay, so I've held off on asking you this, but are you changing religions? Are you Hindu now? Are you Buddhist now? You know, what do you classify yourself as now? And I think that the reason he thinks that is because back in like the 50s and 60s, when yoga really did start to get huge here in the US, there was that huge misconception that you had to be Hindu or Buddhist or be of a religion that originated from, you know, India or the Western world to practice yoga. And I think it was because it was so new here that there was that misconception. There wasn't a whole lot of studios. They weren't practicing a ton of different types of yoga. We didn't have that Baskin Robbins variety that we have now. And so there was that misconception of, oh, well, you're changing your lifestyle and you're living this lifestyle, which isn't true. You can be a yogi who's a Christian. You can be a yogi who's Catholic. You know, there's no real correlation between religion and yoga. Yoga is a philosophy. It is postures. But with that being said, you can be a yogi who just practices philosophy, or you can be a yogi that just practices postures, and that doesn't change your practice. It doesn't make you any less of a yogi or any more of a yogi. Your practice is completely, you know, tuned into what you want it to be. And so for me, I'm not Hindu, I'm not Buddhist. I do identify as a Christian woman, and I don't find any sort of issue with being a yoga instructor and practicing yoga every day and having kind of my rituals of yoga, which that word throws people off. But it is kind of, you know, I wake up, I grab my meditation book for whatever I want to do today, I journal that, I meditate, I do my practice, I go on with my day, I teach my classes, you know, I feed my family, I do whatever I need to do that day. And it's a ritualistic thing because it's a routine. And ritual and routine, I think, go hand in hand for me. Some people will say different, but for me, there's something I do in my daily life, and that's yoga. And again, that doesn't make me a different religion. It doesn't make me worship anything else. It's just my body, my practice, my mind, my yoga.
What I hear you guys saying definitely just sounds like it's an understanding that it is for self-improvement.
Absolutely.
Regardless
Absolutely.
of how you do it. It's to make yourself, your mind, your body better, and that it doesn't have to be affiliated with anything, because ritual, you're right, is just routine. And you're right that people do get thrown off by that word. So if we think of it as a routine, if we think of it as something that you do because it helps you to be grounded, it helps you to feel better about how you've started your day. And I think about my high school students that we have bell work and we have daily grammar that we do, and that is how we start out every class period. And when I break from my routine as an English teacher of high school students, not even specifically talking about yoga at all, to just give an example of, you know, how we probably do it anyway in our daily lives, we just don't say the word ritual. My students come in and they're kind of squirrely. If I don't have the bell work on the board when they come in, when the bell rings, I may have to remind them and say, you have this to work on, but they know to get out the same paper, they know to write down the sentence, they know to correct it, and they know in 5 minutes we'll be talking about it and to have answers ready. And if that routine doesn't exist for any particular reason on a particular day, I do feel a little bit of a dissonance as their teacher. So I think, yeah, if we just start to think about it as this is this one aspect we're talking about, of course, of yoga. It is not ritual. If you don't want to think about it as that, you can think about it as routine to ground yourself and therefore improve whatever aspect of your day you're using that routine for.
So bringing it back to how we were saying how it's a journey for you, I think that throws people off also. Mm-hmm. Even though self-care, that whole movement has become much more of a regular thing in our culture now.
Mindfulness.
Yes, mindfulness,
self-love.
self-love.
Big buzzwords.
Yes, all those
Hashtags.
millennial buzzwords. Those have become much more common in our culture, but for a long time, it was seen as like doing something for yourself is super selfish,
Yes.
super prideful, like saying anything nice about yourself.
Narcissistic.
Yes, exactly. So like, it's great that we're able to relate it to that now, like you're doing something for you as a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing. At an event that I spoke at yesterday, we were specifically talking about gratitude, and so moving into it, I was like, oh, and you can be thankful for yourself. And it's like, oh, that's so weird, thankful for myself, right? What a profound concept. So we all wrote love letters to ourselves, and after the exercise, we all kind of had little small groups where we talked about why it was so difficult to say things that are nice about ourselves. And so a lot of the women, because it was all women, found it really difficult to find things that were nice about themselves because then they're focusing on themselves and not others. And so it is really awesome that it's become more common where, like, yes, if you take care of you, then you can take care of others. And I think yoga, like we were just saying, can be a huge part of that because, yes, it is the poses, and you get started with the poses, and then it becomes so much more for you, or at least I know it has for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. I know that the yoga studio that we all took our yoga teacher training at was the first actual studio I had went into for a yoga class. And I was invited by my cousin. She kind of dragged me out of my house to my first class. And I've always been very athletic. And so after, having a C-section with my daughter, her unexpected birth, and then trying to get back into some routine, and I wanted to compare myself to everyone else on their mat at the time because we're taught almost as a society to compare ourselves. My horse is bigger than your horse. I can do a forearm stand. You can't.
I'm thinner than you.
I'm thinner than you. I'm more flexible than you. And I honestly walked away from my first yoga class very frustrated. And it wasn't because of the teacher. It wasn't because of the other people in the room. It was because of myself. And when I got home from that first yoga class, I remember being so mad. Like, why would anyone ever practice yoga? Like, I was very grumpy about it. And I kind of took a moment just trying to relate back to when we were in Shavasana and we were all laying there and we had some time just to think about the practice. And I said, okay, stop. Is this about yoga or is this about you? Is this about where you're at in life right now? Or did you really just not jive with that yoga practice? And so I went back because I was curious. Is it me or is it the yoga? And about my third or fourth class in, I remember laying in Shavasana, hands down next to my hips, closing my eyes, trying to do that. Full body scan there. And I remember just sobbing, and I was trying so hard not to cry. I was like, damn it, do not cry in public. Do not cry in public. Do not do this. And I remember it was like just this overwhelming release. And I was just sobbing in Shavasana. I'm like, oh God, the yoga instructor's going to come by. She's going to think I pulled something or I'm some lunatic. Like, why am I crying in the middle of her class? And I remember getting up out of the class and, composing myself and going home and crying the whole way home. And even looking at my steering wheel, being like, damn it, Gina, pull it together. What is wrong with you? And really, I needed that full release. I needed to tell myself, it's okay that you can't do everything. It's okay that when you look in the mirror during the yoga practice, you look different. It's okay. And I think that's something we're not taught, is to tell ourselves it's okay. It's okay to feel that emotion. It's okay to have anger. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be mad. Don't say, oh, I can't be mad. I have to be this happy person and shove it to the wayside. Or I have to be completely happy with my practice and shove it to the wayside, because that's not necessarily true. And that was one thing for me in my yoga journey that I found was very helpful, was just letting everything go and letting the practice be how the practice needed to be. And when I tell people that story, I get mixed reviews about it from like my students, and they're like, why did you go back? I mean, you cried. Why do you go back? I've never cried after any exercise in my life. And it's because yoga for me isn't just an exercise. It's so much more than that. It is a way of life. It's a way of living. And I think there's a huge misconception, going back to just kind of everything we've talked about, that yoga doesn't have to be religion. It doesn't have to be stretching. It doesn't have to be philosophy. It is whatever you need it to be.
Raise your hand if you've
Amen.
cried in Shavasana.
Yes.
For those of you
you're
who
not-
can't
you
see
can't see
us
us, but,
because we are a podcast and not a video, all of us just raise our hands. So while you were discussing that, I actually, surprisingly, don't have any stories of people who have kind of pushed back on me having a yogi lifestyle or question me, which I want to just say is surprising to me, considering how, grandparents, if you're listening, I love you. But I know that when I did some vegetarian things in high school, I got a lot of flack from my meat-eating family, and it was just, they were just like, what are you doing this for? And so anyway, I just kind of expect from a lot of my family members to have some pushback because it is so heavily associated with religion, which we discussed is not true for most people. So I think that for me, what misconception I have been facing lately in my yoga practice is this misconception about what it is to be a yoga teacher, or what a yoga teacher is supposed to look like or be able to do. And that is what I'm struggling with, and I am trying to overcome, and I'm doing better at it the last few weeks. But when I first started teaching, I felt like I had to be perfect in each pose, and not just perfect in alignment, because of course we want to be safely aligned in each pose, and that we want to be a good example at the front of the room, because if you're telling them to do this with their body and you're doing something that doesn't look like that, or is not any version of that pose that you're giving them, if your knee is in the wrong spot, then it's going to be harmful to you. You don't want to be demonstrating that. So to have body awareness, of course, is something you have to have as a yoga teacher. But that I don't have to be an expert in every single posture. And I think that that's something I felt like I needed to have during yoga teacher training. I felt a little bit of pressure to become an expert in my own body in every single yoga posture, and not just be able to walk or talk people through those postures, regardless of whether they were more advanced than me or not. And I think that there's a misconception that I have to be able to do every single posture as a yoga teacher, and I'm just going to tell you right now that I can't. And I may never be able to. And so at first, during YTT, parentheses yoga teacher training, end parentheses. Sorry.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, and YTT.
That's what that means. Yeah. For those of you who are like, your acronyms. Okay. So during YTT, I really did feel like I needed to try to force my body into every posture that we went through, and not just the first beginning option of that posture. And I have taken the words or the phrase full version out of my teaching practice lately, because I think that in and of itself creates a misconception about what you are as a yoga practitioner if you can't do the quote-unquote full version of a pose. So I've just taken that out, because I think that that's a misconception based on where your body is on any given day. And there are some days I'm able to do a different variation of a posture, and the next day I may not be able to get to that same variation that I was before, because maybe I destroyed my hamstrings doing leg day at the gym or something. So anyway, that's something that I personally have been going through in my own teaching life as a yoga teacher, is to just be honest. And that I have said in classes before, this doesn't feel great in my body today, but I'm going to walk you through it in case it feels good to you. And I do have people who take that option, but so many people do watch the teacher. So I think there's a big pressure to do that quote-unquote advanced, for lack of better words here, just so we all are on the same page, advanced posture, or to be able to hold handstand or any inversion in the middle of the room for a given amount of time, because of an intense social media presence, I think, first of all, in the yoga world, and then also that a lot of yoga teachers are very advanced, and we feel the need to compete with that. And so I think for me, to just kind of switch that gear a little bit in my practice, that's what I've been dealing with, is this misconception in my own mind to perform almost, or to be able to be the most advanced version of a yogi that I can be, and I just don't think that that is true. Special appearance by my cat Millie, if you can hear that. She is here and she is contributing. So yeah, do you guys have any experiences with that, or does that resonate with you guys at all?
I was going to say, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've been sort of thinking about that lately too, about how there's certain poses that I avoid teaching simply because I know that I can't get into them as well, or like my hips are too tight, or like I may not ever be able to do like the splits because of my hips. Like the splits look different in everybody's body. But so I find myself shying away from teaching certain poses or certain things specifically because I can't do them, or I maybe can't do them as well as I'd like to do. But I think what I've like really been learning, or I've really been working on, is that I love that you never stop learning yoga. Like we always say, or I know I've seen this a lot just through social media and things like that, and I think several of us say it, like practice, or like, what is it, like
Practice makes progress.
Practice makes progress, like progress over like perfection.
Yep.
Like that sort of thing, versus like striving for like, finding that exact perfect posture or something else, instead looking more toward like the, hey, I'm better than I was yesterday, or this feels different than yesterday, or like it's just finding that like happy place. And so I love that there's never a stopping point. It's like, I've officially learned everything in yoga and now I'm done.
Yeah.
It's like you just constantly.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Right?
Yeah. So it was really interesting how you brought up the social media part of it. So like, for example, during YTT, yoga teacher training, I really appreciated that the teacher that we all learned from in yoga teacher training brought up an example of how exactly what we're all talking about, like not everybody is going to be able to do every pose. And so like, for example, I cannot do lotus. I can do half on most days, but I cannot do full lotus pose. And I don't see myself ever being able to, and that's not a negative thing, like, oh, you'll never be able to do it. It's literally just like, oh, that's just my body, and that's okay. And so she said, Jordan may never do lotus pose, but she has an awesome Urdhva Dhanurasana. And so it's just knowing that each body is totally different. And so going back to what you said about the social media, how do I want to ask this? Like, what are our thoughts on if we think it's, I don't want to say good or bad, because there's like so many different elements that go into it. Yeah, I just want to get more of your thoughts on that, all of you.
So I follow on Instagram, and if you're not on Instagram, get one. I don't know. But there's a lot of quote-unquote sponsored yogis on Instagram, where they are sponsored by one of the big clothing brands, or, you know, a yoga company, or whatever have be.
Bottles,
yeah.
all of
And
that.
so, you know, they are sponsored, so they have these sponsored posts. They're wearing the clothes or the brand, or having the water bottle in the corner of the photo. And a lot of these sponsored yogis, I started noticing, do handstands. Every single photo, you scroll through like their 600 photos, is handstand or the quote-unquote full variation of something. And there are these very intense postures. And while I look at some of these yogis who have 500,000, and I'm not joking when I say that number, 500,000 followers, and I think, oh my goodness, here is 500,000 followers, 500,000 people who are looking at this. How many of those people are actually ready to try these poses? Because for me, I look at some of these yogis who are quote-unquote Insta-famous yogis, and I think, you know, I would like to get to that. I like this posture. I like that they did this here. I like that they took this variation, and I use it as inspiration for my practice. Some of the flows that they teach, I'm like, oh, I really like that transition there from Warrior 3 into this pose or whatever have be. And, you know, I do use that as inspiration, but at one point it got to the point to where I was comparing my practice a little bit to some of these other yogis, which I feel is very easy to do on social media, to compare ourselves. And I was discussing it with a friend, and she kind of interrupted me, and she's like, can I tell you something? And I said, yes, of course, you know, we're having a discussion here. And she said, my advice to you is don't compare your chapter 2 to somebody's chapter 8. And I think that has always really resonated with me since she said that, because I have always struggled with upper body strength, and I might not ever have the upper body strength or the core strength to hold a handstand away from the wall, but I'm going to try. And if it takes me 6 years to get there, it takes me 6 years to get there, while it might take Megan 5 years to get there, and it might take Lindsay 3 years to get there. You know, it's just, each person is different, And I think that was really important to have her say that to me. Don't compare your journey right now, where you are at in this little stone of the ocean, to somebody else's stone who's a little bit farther out than yours. You know, everyone's at their different point in their yoga journey, so don't compare your different chapters. And I have always loved that. And there was a quote that one of the instructors that teaches at the studio, where we all did our YTT, and she, during like the 5th or 6th class that I went to there, had said, comparison is the thief of joy. So your mat is your space, and during your class, think about just your space. Not everyone else's space around you, not what the person on the mat next to you is doing. This is your time, your hour to do whatever you need to do. It's your practice. I'm basically just a ringleader up here leading you as an instructor. And so remember that comparison is the thief of joy, and I have loved her since because of that class. I really have.
I do think it's how you approach that social media platform too, both as a consumer, the viewer of the social media, what your intention is behind liking that post, not literally, you know, tapping the like, but just like being like, oh, this is cool, you know, mentally liking. Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm speaking in anyway. So I think it's your intention behind it. Do you like it because you also want to be able to post that cool picture? Or is it because you feel like you want to challenge yourself in a healthy way? And I think that I know all of you guys well enough to know that your intentions behind consuming those pictures and is to have a healthy challenge for yourself. But I do know also, if we're talking about just social media in general, that a lot of people see it in a way to, you know, that kind of breeds jealousy, or that breeds an unhealthy relationship with how they view themselves compared to other people. So I think it is dependent upon how you are consuming the material, and B, maybe even also the intention of the person posting it as well. And that's something that I have had to kind of take a step back just this last week, actually. Every time I teach at a particular studio, it has a beautiful mural. I try to take a picture or like do a flow and screenshot part of it because it's cool, and I like to promote my classes on social media with a nice background. So
That's smart business.
It is, yeah, there we go. So my intention as a contributor to social media, not a significant one, mind all of you, but 400 followers strong. Anyway, yeah. So anyway,
baby celebrations.
There we go. My intention is to have people try to meet me at my classes, not from a big international standpoint as a contributor. However, a lot of my following, a lot of my friends are beginning to intermediate, you know, I would say low-level intermediate people, and I don't want to discourage them. And so in my posts lately, I have started integrating more simple postures with props. One of my most recent ones was mermaid pose, or king pigeon pose with a strap, because I can't get my foot to my head without using a strap. My shoulders aren't quite there, and I don't want to not post that picture because I don't look quote unquote perfect in it. And so I want my students to see that. Similarly, I did one recently that was goddess pose, just in kind of this like bowed position, and goddess has its challenges, but those challenges are not as maybe advanced as the splits, or as advanced as like a handstand in the middle of the room or something. And so I'm trying, for me, in order to view my content in a healthier way and to hopefully have followers that view it in a healthier way, to post something that is more simple. But as we know as teachers, every single yoga pose has a benefit. And even crocodile, which, for those of you who don't know what crocodile is, it's laying on your stomach with your head either turned to the side or your hands stacked together with your forehead resting on top of them. It is basically laying down, like, you know, how that is how I try to go to sleep every night. And so it's a posture, and it has benefits. So it doesn't matter what yoga pose you're doing. So I think that, yeah, those are my answers, that it depends on how you're consuming it, and it depends on your intention posting it too.
Okay. I'm going to play devil's advocate for just
Cool.
a second. Because I mostly agreed with what you just said. However, the thing about, like, someone else's intention behind it, so that's amazing that you want your students to benefit from that, because you're saying, like, you don't have to do it perfectly. You can use a block, you can use straps, everything like that. However, I think that the people that are, okay, let me say this. The people that are posting it, we can only put our own perspectives and experiences on it, right? So, like, no matter what their intention was when they posted it, so you might be putting that as, like, a very genuine, like, helpful post for your students, but there still might be people that accept it in a negative way, because we can only take in our information based on our own experiences, our own view of the world, whatever. And so like, to answer my own question, there are, like anything, so many, like, positives and negatives when it comes to yoga on social media, because there are some amazing teachers and just yogis in general that I follow for, like Gina said, for inspiration, because like,
for sure.
Yes, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I want to get to certain levels of certain poses, like, I'm definitely working towards that, but like you said, Lindsay, it's definitely the intention behind it. So, like, if all I'm doing yoga for is to hit a certain pose, like, I'm not going to say that's wrong, but you will not benefit nearly as much as if you don't put the intention and the philosophy behind it, so that you're bringing the whole person into it instead of just hitting those crazy poses.
One posture.
Because, like, someone can do a handstand in the middle of the room, like, you're awesome. Like, I'm trying to get to that point while knowing that I can't get to that point if that's my only goal. And if I do hit it and that's my only goal, it's not really worth it.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Enjoy the journey and all those cliches.
Oh, right.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really great kind of quote to backpack off that. You can just call me Gina, the quote master over here today. But I saw something this morning, and it resonated with me to the point that I actually posted it on my Instagram post this morning. And it said,
I'm pulling up Instagram right now.
yeah, I am responsible for the things that I say, but not how you understand them. And I think that is something that rings very true with social media, is I can have the best intention for whatever I post, but because it's just words on a screen, somebody else can look at that and see that and say, well, this is very negative to me. I don't really like this. This is how I understand this. And that does not discount how they feel about that post or how they feel about that. Even though I have, the most lighthearted, genuine, concern for this post or intention for this post, somebody else can say, I don't agree with that or I don't like that. And that doesn't discount either one of our opinions. It's just as saying, we have different perspectives on things. And I think it's really easy on social media to become a keyboard warrior. And I see a lot of people doing that, and I use that term very lightly, very lightheartedly. But it's really easy to sit behind a computer or a phone and interpret things versus in a class. And, I have people all the time, why do I need to go into a yoga studio when I can do yoga on YouTube? Why do I need to come to your class when I can do it in the comfort of my own home? And I think that's another misconception that's here in the Midwest is, why do I need to go to a yoga teacher? Why do I need to go to a studio?
Hashtag yoga means union.
Yeah, hashtag yoga means union. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, because I have heard a few students ask, so what really is the difference between me doing this in the comfort of my own home in my PJs and me throwing on some yoga pants and coming to your class?
And that's a perfect segue to kind of what ties this whole episode about misconceptions together, because the last thing to really understand, I think, is what are you going to miss out on if you hold these misconceptions, or if you don't join a yoga practice in whatever way that means to you. And so, yeah, I think that's a great question to kind of ask, to see what would I miss if I didn't come to a class, and and not just a class, but what would I miss out on if I didn't allow myself to explore a certain aspect of yoga. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of add that little transition.
Well,
here.
and that's not to discount people that do yoga
Not at all.
home.
Yeah.
Because,
for sure.
I mean, especially once I start moving with my husband in our schoolie, it's like, I'm going to have to learn how to do that. I mean, yes, I do yoga at home every once in a while, but my main practice was built and fostered and has grown because of the community that I have with all of you. And just like the few local studios that we have here in Wichita. So I'm definitely going to have, for all the places that we travel to, I will definitely want to visit studios there. But since we will only be there for, a few months at a time, it's going to be a lot harder to build that community like I'm used to having. So I'm definitely going to have to do the whole like at-home yoga practice so I can keep my own practice going. But that is a really good point. I guess to answer your question, like, well, why should I come to your class? Only they can, like you said, only they can make the decision for themselves. More than anything, like I said, it's for community. Yoga literally translates as union. But what's great is that can also be union with yourself, with your mind and your body. It can also be union with people around you. And so that's another, maybe a misconception or something that just people didn't know in general.
Yeah,
that's what yoga means. So.
That you would miss out on without practicing. And I had the opposite kind of experience. And we're going to talk about how we came to this in a different episode, but I started in home practice more so than anything else, and I did find a union with myself, more body awareness, things like that. But I do get so much benefit out of going to classes, and as yoga teachers, sometimes we lose the practice a little bit because we are teaching so much that we're tired, and we don't have the time to go to other classes, and also other classes that we could attend happen at the same time we're teaching. So anyway, I think that people can miss out on a union with self or community for sure. And something that I would have missed out on had I not pursued yoga, a misconception of my own would definitely be that I'm not advanced enough or I'm not flexible enough to be here, is to just kind of like meet myself where I am. On the day, start where you are. Okay. Yeah. Depending on the day, I know that my body is going to be different based on what I've eaten the day before, based on what workout I've done recently or not done. And so I think for me, I would miss out on something in tune with my own body and my own mind, and understanding how my diet affects the way that I behave in the hours and days to follow what I've eaten, and just an awareness that yoga brings, because that is part of the yoga lifestyle, is like, how are the things, both mentally and physically, that you are consuming as a person affecting you. And that's something that I think I would have missed out on had I not joined a community, had I not gone to YTT, had I just continued to practice on my own, because I was just watching videos specifically for posture, for exercise. So, yeah.
And I think a lot of it, too, comes down to, like your mindset on it, I guess. Like, if you have an open, curious mindset about anything, really, like yoga, not yoga, any sort of thing, like, it's like, well, like, maybe at-home practice is your jam. And it's like, I like to be in my PJ pants. I like to roll my mat out in my living room, like, pull up a video on YouTube, which is awesome. But if you've got that curiosity, if you're able to have that open mindset of, oh, what could I be missing? Open enough to where maybe you go and try a class, or maybe you try a few classes, and it could still, like, not necessarily be your jam, but you'd be surprised that you could still get something out of it. And maybe you get something out of it that you can then take back with you to your home practice, or take back onto your mat and your PJ pants in your living room.
Yeah.
But by having that, just being really open to it, I think, and really curious about, like, well, why am I so against it? Like, what's making me say no so hard is what usually drives me to, like, pursuing it a little bit further, trying it out to figure out what it is exactly that I think is making me say no.
I think we could do an entire episode just on that.
Just absolutely.
Like being open-minded.
For
sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that would be something that someone would miss out on, is that I think that regardless of whether you come to it with an open mind or a closed mind, wherever you're at in your journey of life, if you stick with something that is a yogi lifestyle, whether that's practicing just in classes, you do get more open-minded as you go, because even if it is just physical for you, which a lot of people do just do the physical practice, and that's fine because you are doing something for you. You're taking time out of your day for yourself. Even if you do just a physical practice, maybe one day like you feel better about yourself because you went to a class and you kept an open mind and tried a posture that you didn't think that you'd be able to do, which as teachers, you guys know people try all the time in classes, and I'm sure that we have all heard it. I never knew I'd be able to do this.
Yes.
And it's usually, I hear it a lot with crow pose, people who think that their bodies will
It's like
never.
the gateway pose.
It is, yeah.
It totally was mine. I was like, oh my
Yes,
God.
it looks hard, but if you are given the instruction to get there, then you got it. So I think that, yeah, it breeds an open-mindedness just from being in the community anyway. So, yeah.
I love that.
Well, we would love to hear from you guys. You can reach out to us via email at hello@flyoveryogispodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram and on Facebook at Fly Over Yogis. And we'd love for you to leave us a rating on iTunes. Thanks so much for listening.
Namaste.